how's your work today? All right, so I wasn't here, well, I was here last week, but I didn't teach because I'd been on the road for 12 hours. Thanks again, Don, for leading the class. Or no, it was my brother, Joe, last week. You were leading choir. Thank you again. In the education on how cows do or don't act, and why it was such an amazing act of God when they put the two, because he taught about when the Philistines had taken the Ark of the Covenant, and their god Dagon fell on his face twice, broke his face and hands off the second time. And so they're like, all right, and they got tumors, probably like the bubonic plague, and said, all right, we're gonna put this ark, we're gonna send it back. We made 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice or rats. Memorize this, we're gonna send it back, but this is how we'll know if God really plagued us. We're gonna take 2 cows, milking cows who just had babies. We're gonna separate them from their babies. We're gonna put them on a yoke. They've never known a yoke before. And then we're just gonna put the ark on there and send them on their way. If it goes up there, God did this to us, but cows don't act that way, so it's not gonna happen. So we'll know that God didn't do this. And the cows went straight up to where they needed to go. So kind of proved right there that yes, God was in this whole thing. So pretty amazing. And having a veterinarian, a large animal veterinarian, to be able to explain how cattle work brings a lot of clarity. So thank you, brother. All right, so 2 weeks ago, we wrapped up on the bride gift as we're looking at the Jewish wedding, right? We had the cup of the covenant. Remember, the groom says, I will not take this cup again until I drink it with you in my Father's house. So we'll be getting after this soon into the bride's or the groom's departure. But after they take that cup, in the traditional rite, it's up to 12 months separation. But the groom then gives his bride a gift. We talk about the traditional thing now is the ring. They put it on the index finger. Ultimately, it moves over. But that's symbolic of the Holy Spirit. That once she accepts the covenant, right, of the marriage, entering into salvation, as it were, right, receives that gift, that promise that the groom will return, and for her to think upon the groom until that time that they're together again. It is a beautiful picture of the Holy Spirit. Well, what we're going to talk about today is purification. It's called the mikveh. You'll see it as these things never work, do they? You guys can't see real well when I use the camera. Let me see if I have a black one.
Most of us can't see well until.
Anyway, it's in your handout, mikvah. Sometimes you'll see it veh, or even in the original Hebrew, miqweh, mikveh. But as the purification, this is what follows in the exact timing. Sometimes it's right before the betrothal ceremony. Sometimes it's afterwards. So I'm not going to get into all of that, but it's just interesting. As I looked at Jewish documentation, this is the order that it followed in, and it's pretty amazing, if you ask me. But so we'll start off with what is the mikveh? What does that mean? So in ancient Israel, and it's still used today, the bride undergoes a cleansing prior to their wedding. It's part of that whole ceremony. It is called the mikveh, and that's, well, the mikveh is actually the place. It is a pool of living water. That is the mikveh itself, and they go to that as part of a ritual purification for them to get married. So the Torah, and that's what we're going to look at up front, is kind of what does it have to say about the mikveh. The Torah has several passages that talk about a requirement for total body immersion, for total cleansing. Yes?
I think it's really crazy that we're going through this right now because, side note, we're watching The Chosen and they're like literally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did, but they walked in the pool. I didn't know what it was called, but I was like, oh, maybe they're just cleaning her.
Yeah.
and then they talked about the mohar, and then Jesus was like, Tom, what are you gonna give her? And he was like, oh, she doesn't want the thing. And then Peter was like, no, she does.
Wow,
So
I'm going to
we're
start
through
watching
it.
this.
Yeah, it literally is going through it.
Am I off base too much?
No, it sounds pretty close. They don't go into it in detail, but everything you're saying, I'm like, oh, they just went through this. I want that episode.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna have to, I've got bits and pieces of it, but I've never watched all the way through, so I'll start doing that. You don't have to turn there, but we will be in Leviticus in a minute, but Leviticus 15, 16 through 18, the reason I won't go super in depth is because we have some young ladies here, but is a requirement for ritual purification after sexual activity. And it is talking about afterwards that they are to cleanse themselves, and then in the evening they will then be clean. All right? And in verse 16 though, it says, he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean until the even. And then it comes down into verse 18 and it says that she also will bathe herself in the water and be unclean until the evening. Well, the word there is rachas, and it means it is that washing. And it, as you go through, you'll see things. We're going to talk about the lepers and the cleansing here in a minute. It talks about washing the clothes. That is a completely separate word when it talks about washing clothing or a physical item versus the washing of the body. Two completely separate terms. And in this one, what it involves, the way the Hebrew breaks out, it talks about the entire body. Okay, and it is based upon this that rabbinic tradition said nothing can block the water. And so that's where they laid the groundwork of total immersion, which we'll see in a minute, the tevilah. And we're going to cover tevilah a little bit more. But it means total immersion in the water with nothing blocking or coming between the flesh and the water. Okay? So you look over in Leviticus 11:36, this is where it's talking about lepers. Or, I'm sorry, this is where we get the mikveh. We'll get to lepers in a minute. Leviticus 11:36, what does that say?
Nevertheless, a fountain or pit wherein there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which touches their carcass shall be unclean.
This is significant in this study because this is where you actually find the word mikveh. And you're like, okay, I don't see anything that talks about all this water. In the King James Version, you have the word plenty. That is mikveh. That's where we get this from. It means a gathering together of waters. A spring or a cistern, right here it says like a pit or whatever, where running water comes down and gathers. That was considered clean. It's as it moves through there. And this verse is distinguishing between that natural gathered water versus that was gathered in vessels through human agency, through somebody going out and doing it. What you have to understand is as you look at all of Leviticus 11, God is laying out these are clean and these are unclean animals, insects, whatever, that you can or cannot eat. And so he's talking about all of that. Well, in the verses immediately preceding this, verses 32 through 35, right, he says, talking about these unclean things, he says, and upon whatsoever any of them, when they are dead, doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel of wood, or raiment, or skin, or sack, whatsoever vessel it be, wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the even, so it shall be cleansed. And every earthen vessel wherein to any of them falleth, whatsoever is in it shall be unclean, and ye shall break it. You have that unclean, that wooden vessel or whatever is unclean, it has to be broken, can't be used anymore. Of all meat which may be eaten, that on such water cometh, it talks about being unclean, verse 35. And everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean, whether it be oven or ranges for pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean unto you. So then he says, but a mikvah is clean. That distinguishing there. And it became the primary legal source of ruling that a mikvah must have living water. What a concept. What do we read about in the New Testament about living water? Right? We talk about Christ. We talk about Messiah. We receive that. Rather than that drawn by human hands. Now, Leviticus 14, 8 and 9, I'll read that. If you want to go ahead and turn over to 2 Kings 5, that's where we'll be in a minute. Because that's also talking about a leper. But in Leviticus 14, 8 through 9 is talking about the cleansing of a leper. And he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, separate term, and shave off all his hair, and wash, this is the rahas we just spoke about, wash himself in water that he may be clean, and after that he shall come into the camp and shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. That it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, even all his hair he shall shave off, and he shall wash his clothes. Also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. Again, it's that ritual purification to be set free from the leprosy. A lot more that goes into that. Then over in 2 Kings chapter 5, if somebody will read verses 10 and 14.
And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. But Naaman became furious and went away and said, Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Parpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he said to you, Wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean.
So here we have Naaman. In the first instance with the lepers, right? It was talking about washing within a mikvah. It was talking about that full immersion for purification. It was that, as you see that ritual purification, it's a biblical requirement of transitioning from ritual impurity into purity before you can reintegrate into society. Now with Naaman was the commanding general of the Syrian army. Powerful man. Most likely a man of valor, right? Hence what his servants told him. Hey, if the prophet had told you to go do some mighty deed, you would have gone and done it without question. He's telling you to go wash in the Jordan 7 times. You're like, who's he, right? You know, my rivers are cleaner. Let me go do that. Well, we have here in verse 14 that he dipped himself. When we talk about dipping something, what comes to mind? Just a touch, right? I'm going to dip my toe and see if the water is favorable for me to go in. I'm going to dip my grandson Oliver was here, I'm going to dip my chicken nugget, he loves those, right, in the sauce. I mean, I'll bathe it. So we hear dip, and we tend to get the idea that it's just, okay, I'm just going to touch the water, I'm going to touch the water, I'm going to touch the water. Did you have something?
Oh, no.
Okay. That's not what it is. The Hebrew there is tevilah. And it is the root word for what I mentioned earlier, tevilah, which is total immersion. Yes, it means to plunge into. Dip or plunge into. So when the prophet said, go wash yourself 7 times, right? Where? In living water. It's water that's flowing. It's not stagnant. It's not considered unclean. Go wash yourself. So once he then follows it, he goes and he dips himself. He didn't go like, okay, splash, splash, splash. Naaman went and he completely immersed himself 7 times. Yes.
Is that why baptism is the way it is, unlike the Catholics when they do a little sprinkle?
Yes.
Okay.
Because throughout it talks about the full immersion.
Makes sense.
So he had to do this. When he followed that guidance, he was made pure. The leprosy went away. So that's the baseline of the mikveh and the tevilah. Now, what does it have to do with marriage? That's what we're here to learn about, right? The Jewish wedding. So the customary ritual represents separation from the old life and the new life. Just like all these other things we've been talking about, we're seeing under the authorities and everything, how all of that is separated out. You know, you're betrothed to your groom, you're not beholden to your father and your brothers. Get rid of that old life. This continues with that same concept, that same mindset. It is showing a change, a transition from being single to being married. Those of us that are married, is life exact? I'm not saying good or bad, right? Is life the same once you get married as it was when you were single? No. It changes. Your relationship changes. Your responsibilities change.
Transformation.
It's a transfer, right? Your goals begin to change, right? It is. There's a shift. Yes, ma'am.
You leave father and mother and everything to live with your husband and make a home.
Yep. And it's a piece of cake, right? No, there's work that goes into that. As I mentioned earlier, it symbolizes a change in authority. The bride is now under the authority of the husband, right? According to Jewish tradition, and not that of her father. There is a shift. So rabbinic tradition and classical commentary, they related, it's interesting, we've looked several times in Exodus 19 at what happened at Sinai, right? How God presented the contract, right? When he said, and he came in and he said, all right, let me show you who I am, right? Going back to the bride selection, he said, I chose you. Not because you're special, not because you're great in number. I chose you out of all the nations to create a great nation, to be my people, be that special treasure to me. I then delivered you out of Egypt. I paid the mohar for you. I did all of these things, and now with that, and I've got you here before Sinai, now I'm offering, and the 10 Commandments, remember, was the marriage contract. Will you enter into it with me? You have to say yes or no. Well, rabbinic tradition, classical commentators also go back to this point to say, in a sense, this also shows us the mikveh and the tevilah, even though it doesn't specifically call it out. How do I get that? Well, in Exodus 19, verses, if somebody will read verses 10 and verse 14. So verse 10 and verse 14 in Exodus 19.
Then the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes.
Before all this could happen, God said the people need to be purified. They need to be cleansed. They need to be sanctified. And so they draw from this, saying that this points, at least metaphorically, to this ritual cleansing before they entered into the marriage, right? As they go into this. Now, I looked around, I did searches and stuff. The Old Testament doesn't give us direct pictures of the bride going through this process. Okay, there's several other things we have where the closest come up is Ruth, in Ruth 3:3, where her mother-in-law says, "Go out to this area, right? And go back to the field, but I need you to cleanse. You need to go through this." There was a ritual cleansing. There's Leviticus 5 covers women with their menstrual period. They have to go through this purification. And so it may have been part of that, but it was also kind of, she was really pointing towards Boaz will be our Redeemer kinsman. And you're putting yourself forward for potential marriage. And so she told her in Ruth 3:3, you need to go out and you need to go through this process of this ritual cleansing and purification, tying it to the marriage. So that's the closest we have. Nevertheless, as rabbinic tradition began to take hold, and there's a lot of documentation. So Steve Herzig, he wrote a book, Jewish Culture and Customs, and he was talking about the mikveh, the tevilah, and he said the bride and the groom isn't required, but they go and they immerse separately in a mikveh for their sanctification. It says, and as they do this, what they do is they proclaim devotion to one another and separation from all others.
Amen.
Monogamy in the marriage. Once you get married, I'm yours and you are mine, and that's it. There is nobody else. That's what they're proclaiming within that. Now, traditional Jewish understanding of the mikveh and the immersion, they see it as a religious ceremony with a lot of spiritual symbolism, right? In this, God is the one who is praised. He's praised because it is God who purifies his people. It is God who sanctifies through his commandments. And it is God who gave the commandment for full immersion. As we study through that. So that's where they look upon these different things. Now, Rabbi Akiva, he was a first century rabbi, very well known. Ron, so go back to you, I said, I didn't realize this. I'm reading a 5-volume set. I know it's boring to most people, but the history of the Jewish people in the first century. And I just read about Rabbi Akiva last night in my reading during the uprising during Hadrian's time. It was like, wow, same guy. Anyway, that's a side note. Commenting on the mikvah, Rabbi Akiva said, "May you be praised, O Israel. Before whom are you purifying yourselves? Who purifies you? Your Father in heaven. Just as the mikvah purifies the impure, so does the Holy One, blessed be he, purify Israel." So, even talking about it is all drawing back to God. Okay? So, I'm just going to go through the mikvah and the tevilah. The tevilah is the core of this process. And we'll probably end up a few minutes early, I think so, right? Because next week then we'll start getting into what is the spiritual connotation of this. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about believers' baptism. If you haven't picked up on it already with this, it's a beautiful picture, right? You accept Jesus Christ, immediately you are filled with the Holy Spirit, the bride's gift. And what's the next step we should do? Believers' baptism. And it just happens to be the mikveh and the tevilah, the ritual purification, by immersing yourself in water. What a beautiful picture to have in a Jewish wedding. It's amazing. I was talking to Brother John about this. It's like mind blowing as I really dig into it. So with this, the first phase of the process is the preparation. A lot of meticulous care and preparation. And again, this is still happening in Israel and in Jewish families as they follow these things. They have to make sure that the tevilah, the immersion, is valid. It takes place in a private bathroom before entering the pool. So the first part is cleaning. The bride has to wash her hair, brush her teeth, clean her ears, and scrub her entire body. As I was digging into it, because as you look at teval, as you look at tevilah, it indicates that nothing can come between your flesh and the purifying water. And while the woman entering into the mikvah, into the pool, isn't required to open her eyes, they even say you can't close them so tight. Yes, sir.
What about the man? Would he have to go through the same?
We'll get here.
Okay.
We'll get there. The mouth doesn't have to be open, but it can't be closed so tight the water can't come in. But in case the water does enter the mouth, the reason they have to meticulously clean their teeth is they say a particle of food stuck between the teeth is preventing that cleansing water from touching the teeth. And so it is very, very meticulous what they go through in the pre-cleaning of the body to do these things. They also have to remove the barriers. No makeup, no nail polish, no jewelry, no contact lenses, no bandages or band-aids. In fact, as I was reading yesterday, they even have now requirements for the insulin pumps. If you have a permanent insulin pump or whatever, the bride sitting there going, well, this isn't something that I would normally take off, therefore I'm not required to. But if the majority of the people say, yes, that is something that would need to come off, you have to, for it to be a proper tevilah. If it's loose enough that it allows the water through, they might allow that. If you've been working with dyes and whatever, and it gets into your skin, now it's become part of your skin. But a splinter that's sticking out of the skin is a barrier and must be removed. I mean, it gets really, really meticulous, very detailed here. But it has to do all of that so nothing comes through that. Then, after all of this, she has to have her hair combed thoroughly. There can be no knots or tangles in the hair, because it might prevent, it says it could trap air or block the water from getting in. Therefore, it has to be very thoroughly brushed out and combed out. That's the preparation step. Now, before the bride can step into yes ma'am.
Do all the Jews in Israel go through this ceremony, or some just go through different kinds?
Not everybody follows the
Because
orthodoxy.
it's kind of very,
Right.
very strict.
Right, it is.
So not everyone goes
But
through
like,
that.
but like Maria's got a friend who's Jewish who's been telling her that her daughter just recently got married and went through this whole process.
But not all
We've been
Jews
teaching.
go through.
No, but it is still fairly common. And in fact, they still have, when we were looking at the selection of the bride, they actually have people that are professional people to go out and do
To take them
matchmaking.
through it.
To do matchmaking even. And establish all this stuff. It is still very much alive and well in Israel. Not everybody follows, because not all of them are as religious as they once were. So, so the ritual steps and blessings, after this preparation takes place, now they have a trained mikveh attendant who is there with the bride, called the shomeret. She has to check the bride over to make sure everything's done right, to include checking the bride's back and hair to make sure there are no loose hairs and there are no barriers, no remaining knots or tangles in the hair. Then is the first immersion. For many, it is the only immersion, right? So, in essence, to get away, it's not like we have to get baptized over and over and over. Okay. The bride walks into this warm pool to perform the first complete submersion. When she comes out of the water, she places her hands over her heart. Some customs say it's a towel over the head, a covering, right? But she places her hand, and I'll try not to butcher the Jewish too much, but Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al tevilah. There's that word tevilah, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us concerning immersion. That's how they come out of the waters, with that blessing. Now, some communities require multiple submersions. That's just something they've adopted. Whether it's one or multiple, this attendant that we talked about, the shomeret, will watch, and after it's successful, because the entire body must be under the water, the hair must go under the water. Don't mean to be offensive, I'm just going to tell you what. There are even requirements on the position that they put their body as they're in there, the way they place their legs, the bending forward. They can't lean so far forward that the breasts lean against the chest, because that creates a barrier for the water. So they have to position themselves in such a way that the entire body is being touched by the water. Only then are they declared, and this will be called out by the attendant, kosher. Once the successful tevilah is done, they are now considered fit. That is what the kosher indicates.
How long do they have to stay in that position?
Just until they have that proper thing where everything appears to be covered, right? It's not like, I don't think it's gonna like boom, boom, in and out, right?
Yeah.
But it's not, I didn't see anything that prescribes an exact amount of time. So, I can look up more, but I hadn't seen anything that really called that out. So, then there's also what is called the shehekianu. It starts off the very same as the last blessing I did, but changes up a little bit, and not all do this, but many do. After the final immersion, they are thanking God for bringing them to this special milestone within their life. And the English of it is, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, or Lord our God, sovereign of all, also translated King of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this season. They're thanking God for bringing them. Remember, when we started looking at this, that of all the things that take place within our life, Jewish tradition holds that marriage is the most sacred. It is the most important. As we think about our marriage into the family of Jesus Christ, should that not be the most sacred thing in our lives? Should we not come out thanking God for reaching out to us? Should we not be thanking God for bringing us to that milestone within our life that changed us completely? That delivered us from the power of evil and darkness and put us into a new relationship? We should be doing that. Now, when does all this happen? For brides, traditionally after nightfall, a few days before the ceremony. Now, for grooms, as Brother Angelo was asking, it's not mandated by law. Grooms don't have to go through this for the wedding. Okay, but many do. Again, it kind of goes back to that, showing I'm with you and I'm showing that I am separating myself apart for you.
Why wouldn't they not have to? I mean,
Part of it ties back to Leviticus 5, which is the purification from the menstrual cycle. Men don't have that. And so every time a woman has that, she has to get purified. And so that's where a lot of this sprang from as well, was that impurity. Which, this is a bonus, I'll just throw it out to you. When Bathsheba was on the rooftop cleansing, was probably because of Leviticus 5. She was cleansing from her menstrual cycle. And that's when David saw her, which also shows Uzziah could not have ever been the father. Because he was already at war. If she was pregnant, she wouldn't be having a menstrual cycle. And therefore she was up with her purification when he saw her. That's why David tried to get Uzziah to go lay with his wife when he brought her back. So he had a plausible deniability. And that's why he killed Uzziah. That's free, that wasn't part of the notes. Now, it's customary that from the time of the entering the mikvah, that the bride and groom say they will not see each other until they meet again under the bridal canopy, under the chuppah, for the final ceremony. Remember, we had the betrothal ceremony, but then you will have the final, which we'll see takes place about a year later. Okay, because the groom departs. We're going to study that later. So the meaning, the significance, and we'll wrap it up here today. Complete submergence. Again, I said she has to be completely under the water. She has to be completely under that cleansing. And it takes back to the teachings of the Torah about that ritual purification. We can't enter into a relationship with Christ half-heartedly. We can't enter into this and the covering of his blood only partially. And we'll talk about that more next week. It also has we talked about the barriers, no barriers. The term there is the chatzitza. Absolutely nothing can come between the body and the water. There can be no barriers. This is something I've been praying about in my own life quite a bit more lately, is what barriers do I have right now? What strongholds have I allowed to remain in my life that stands between me and God? Tear them down. Get rid of the barriers that hold you back from entering that relationship that God desires with you, that God commands us to pursue. Have no barriers. And then the spiritual rebirth. The tevilah, as you trace that word back, as you look at the linguistic roots of this, it shares the concept of spiritual transformation. Okay? Emerging from water is seen as stepping into a new status, and which they call in this particular circumstance, the kala, the bride. The bride enters the water and comes out new, comes out in a different state than what they were. Next week, we'll start getting into the spiritual sense. We're going to look at how the prophets talked about it. And then, of course, we will go into the New Testament use and the picture of baptism and the blood on the altars and all that stuff, in the blood, the dipping, right? Talked about, we'll talk about that next week, when the priest dipped his finger in to sprinkle before the veil, right? But remember, that means plunge. You didn't take a little sample of blood from a sacrificial lamb and that was enough, it took all of it. Yes, sir.
So was this ceremony, supposed to be, outside of the marriage process, private? Was it supposed to be done privately when a woman cleansed herself from her menstrual cycle or whatever? Was that meant for her to do that privately without anybody seeing? Or like Bathsheba, who did it more openly, where David was allowed himself to see this?
Well, she did it at night, right, when most people would have been asleep.
Okay, so
And he was up, he couldn't sleep, remember? He was
Right.
He was also sinning against God because it was the time the kings went to war. And David sent his armies off to war and he should have been at the front leading it.
Right, yeah.
But he stayed back, so he was in the wrong.
And he was on
with
the
all
roof.
stuff. And he was on
No,
the
no,
roof.
he was on the run, I know that
Yeah.
totally, but, as she performed that, not ceremony, but
Right.
that
That
situa-
ritual, right.
yeah, ritual, she did it thinking she was in a private situation,
Yes.
so that meant
My
that when,
understanding, yes.
okay, so that ritual was meant to be done in private where nobody,
And I would
then
assume that
David-
most roofs
yeah,
would have had, like, if she had a covering around it,
yeah.
but the palace is much higher.
Yeah,
It
so
has-
he was able to
has a-
see, yeah,
uh,
so totally his sin, no matter what.
Yes.
I mean, cause he's the one,
That's as I read it.
Yeah.
Yes,
I just wanna say that, I mean, I don't know if y'all know, but in Iraq, when you have a roof, our roofs are flat or slanted or whatever, but their roofs are flat, but they still have walls that come up about
Yep.
5 or 6 feet. You know, and that's usually where they sleep at night
because it's
and
cooler.
do other things, you know, bathe or whatever. And so you're not seeing your neighbors like we would see our neighbors.
Right.
so he totally looked, I mean, it was
Yeah.
totally his.
Probably
It
caught his
wasn't
eye,
like somebody,
right.
like, oh, what's
the
that?
temptation,
It was-
and he was like, hey,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
and
a temptation.
so that's where he messed up. Alright, anybody else? Alright, Josh, can I get you to close today?
Lord, I thank you for this lesson that we learned today and about the marriage and the Jewish marriage and the steps that it takes to purify one's soul. And I pray that we continue to purify ourselves before the Lord. And I hope that we learn from this and apply it to our lives. And I pray that as we get ready for the message, that we purify ourselves before you, Lord, and learn from this. Jesus, I pray, amen.
Amen.
We've seen everybody here today.